Hi there, it's Celine again, and it's Friday, the 27th of August. Yes, wouldn't say from the rain that's coming down. Actually, I don't hate the rain at the moment. Um, it's a bit soothing, and I can do with some soothing. So, I didn't have any plans for today in terms of vlogging or, you know, show and tell or witchy stuff or any of it. Also, because I haven't been really fit, I've had a bit of a bowel issue, which I won't go into details and bore you with because we've all been there, haven't we? However, there's a couple of thoughts that I've been having, and especially today, this morning. It is now in this place 11:30 in the morning, that is, and I haven't been sleeping very well in the sense that I don't get to a state of relaxation that I should have. What I'm hoping is that as I share my travails here or part of solutions for travails eventually, hopefully, that it can inspire other people to either relate for themselves or to go like, okay, so that's one way of looking at things. I don't know. Why do we do these things? Because it's better to talk about things than not to. That's the way I feel. I don't feel silence has ever profited me in any way. So maybe I should come up with, first of all, I have, okay, so my bowels, okay, what's been going on is there is a difficulty in assessing always, whenever we have a physical problem, a health problem, even if it's only very temporarily, assessing what the whys and wherefores. Why have I got this problem? Why is this happening to me? Is there anything I could have done different or not done? Or is there a way of thinking that I have to be aware of? Or that's how I deal with this type of stuff anyway. So there have been phases where in my holidays I actually got what happened is I get constipation in my tent camping, which I'm certainly not the only person having that. It's already a bit of a, you have to be really fit actually. You should ideally, I think, be between 16 and 30 years of age to enjoy camping in outdoors, nature, all the time, really. And I've had a bit of an issue. It turns out that it wasn't one thing only. So there's one element that I feel is useful always to realize, especially when it comes to tummy problems or health things having to do with this here, or that, is that there's always more than one thing going on at the same time for the body, okay? The body doesn't do a problem because it's got one problem. The body is, in my opinion, really strong, really resourceful, really versatile, really resilient, and doesn't really give in that easily. But if there's several things sort of piling up in one category of where things tend to get hairy, so to speak, it'll cave in. It'll just, it doesn't know what to do anymore. And one thing I also realized is that the type of real situation that I've been having over the past couple of weeks really isn't unusual at all. It becomes a problem because I have a very sheltered lifestyle. If you're not so hypersensitive to all this kind of thing, if you're just tougher, I suppose, it doesn't, The other connection I made for myself is that there is a similarity between this type of bowel problem, constipation, and then all the rest of it, afterwards, compared to headaches and migraines, where once, I mean, I haven't, so far, I've had very little headache problems over the past year. It's been steadily going downhill with headaches, which is awesome, because wow. Um, but there's a similarity in that as soon as I have a headache, it is bound to just stay in there because I fight it. It becomes worse because I fight it. And the body, if the body is just left to its own devices, and you distract yourself and you manage to really, which is hard to do with headaches, and it's similarly fairly hard to do with what I've, having with my bowels. I'm sorry to be talking about. I won't talk about the bowels anymore, okay? It's only an attachment point for me to be telling my story here. Is that I'm fighting myself basically. There's parts inside me that are fighting each other, and I can't get them to be distracted and give over, and just give it up, and just go do something else for a bit. Actually, yesterday I was really happy doing something else. I did a spot of drawing for an hour and a half or so, and I will show you the results. I'm fairly pleased with my result. There she is, a naked female, and there's things that can be said about that. Anyway, I spent a pleasant couple of hours on that, and I think her head's too big still. Never mind. The thing is, what the whole thing means for me, which is why I'm really here. I'm not here to describe my problems necessarily, unless we can get to a level beyond the obvious, okay? So for me, I have to sort of, if I go back in time a couple of weeks, first of all, to see where my physical situation originates. I said I was noticing a pile up of a set of situations that were just all too much for my belly, not just, that part of my digestive system, but my whole emotional belly had a hard time, a difficult time dealing with the situation. So what happened is basically there was no crisis as such. There was no, so you don't have to have a crisis. You do not have to have a massive, like obvious in your face kind of a, okay, this is a problem kind of a situation. You don't have to have that. You can just have what I had, which was feeling worn out, having felt worn out for more than a year now, what with COVID and lockdown, and we haven't been ill or any of us, but the, vibrational things and all the things around the lockdown have been the same for us as for everybody else. So worn out, exhausted, badly in need of some rest and relaxation time, which didn't seem to come, okay? Instead, I get more work, it feels like. So, which is all part of a longer term process that we're also all involved in, I think. I think everybody, or lots of people nowadays, and over 2020 and 2021, whether they've actually had, direct COVID issues themselves or not, they're going through things, okay? They're going through things, and it's a process, and you just have to figure out head and tail and how things work together. So that's what I'm trying to do here for myself, and maybe it'll serve, somebody. So feeling worn out, starting off on my holiday already in a state of not feeling super fit, not feeling like, oh yeah, we were excited about going on holiday, and we had, nice plans for a holiday, and it was going to be fine, and it was fine. There were large parts of the whole holiday which were completely excellent, apart from losing my phone, which still hasn't come back to me. And I'm having hopes that it will be coming today or next week somewhere. It's sure to show up, because it'll be okay. But that's been a bit of a setback, definitely, because it's also very much part of my life. So you don't want to be super clingy about your phone, but that's just the way it goes. I challenge anybody out there to go like, oh, what? I'll just replace the phone, Not if there's a zillion photographs and important things in there. Okay, so then in sort of chronological order, what happened is that we were in the south of France, my husband and I, with our tent, and first of all, we had problems with rain and a leaking tent, okay? I think I've talked about this already last week. We managed to get ourselves a huge tarp to throw over the tent and tie down with bits of rope, bits of cotton yarn, like so that it would stay in place. And that has protected our tent beautifully, and that was all fine. However, during that day when we actually went and managed to find this tarp, we had two other big events happen to us. First of all, we visited, that's what I was going to say like a minute ago, 3 minutes ago, at the start of this long-winded paragraph here. We visited the village, I should say, where my mum used to rent a house the last few years of her life. This is taking place in the years 1990 to 95, thereabouts, okay? This is a gorgeous, beautiful little Provençal village in the south of France, in the Provence. And I have thought of this town often with fond memories most of the time. I was prepared. I had sort of thought of it beforehand. I wouldn't be surprised if we got to visit that place. There is another small village where I actually myself lived with my mother, which is on the other side of the range of hills in that area. And that I have revisited before in 2014, among other moments. Was a very important time for me, very emotional. It was terrifying, and I had all sorts of reasons why that was very impactful, but I have used the event, used the memories of that visit, coming back there, acknowledging for myself what it felt like, basically. So I felt like visiting the other place where actually this was almost like her life ended there, would be not necessarily less painful, but less problematic for me to get at, because I was older. I don't know, something along those lines. We were there for about an hour or two. We actually did a bit of shopping. I talked to a couple of people, the butchers and his wife, they're still in business, a quarter of a century later. It's amazing. They actually recognize us, and immediately, even you have to pull down your face mask, and it's like instant recognition. And they liked us because we were nearly, well, I wouldn't say friends, but we were customers that always came back to them. So yeah, so that was fun. I talked to a couple of other people in that village. I didn't used to know that many people. It wasn't a problem, but it was emotional. It was definitely emotional. And I'm trying to also figure out for myself, as I sit here and talk to you and use you over there, thank you very much for letting me do this once again, to sort of get a sense of what it is that's happening to me, what it is that's causing this pile-up situation. Why is it black moonstone, black obsidian, okay? Grounding and centeredness and peace and acceptance, hopefully, eventually. Why is it that the pile-up happens in this way, and so on and so forth? So that's what I'm trying to get at here. Trying to be therapeutic for myself and maybe for somebody else. As I do this, it'll help somebody, you know. It always does. So it was emotional. It wasn't a problem. I was not having that much of a resistance. I didn't feel any resistance at the time. On the contrary, I was very glad that I could be there, experience this with my husband together. He was also really emotional. And that's actually more tricky for me when my husband's emotional. Yeah. Is much more tricky than when I am emotional, because I know what to do with my own emotions most of the time. I just bawl or get upset or something. And sometimes it takes me an age and a half to figure out what it is that I'm really dealing with emotionally at a particular point. It becomes that much harder when it's somebody else and somebody I actually depend on. Because I depend on him for my livelihood anyway. And we are really, we have been together for a long time. So he depends on me the same way. You just have to be within certain parameters in order for life to work. Or you have to get back within those parameters at some point, and that's kind of where it goes wonky in my life. So I keep trying to have images that aren't so serious, because yowzer. So there was that bit, okay? That bit was actually I was okay with it. And I think my husband was slightly less okay, because he's had more of a kind of a problem dealing with emotions, finding out more and more recently over the past couple of years that emotions are as big for him as they are for me. That even though he doesn't bawl or shout, that doesn't mean that there isn't. This is a man who actually does have the same level of intensity of emotions that I have, obviously. As soon as you state that, as soon as you accept the fact that this is the case, it's like, okay, but that isn't a big surprise, really. Only I have to realize that this is the case. I have to be aware and sort of compute that he's not a robot. He may be a man, but he's not a robot. Oh, angels, like that. Because where did we grow up? We grew up in a world. I grew up in a world. He grew up in a world where men were supposed to be robots most of the time. It was never true. It was never the case. Never. We're still dealing with the fallout from all the times in generations back where people were busy not being robots, really. Pretending to be robots. Oh. I'm not going to go into my whole Marlene Dietrich segue, which I've been watching videos about, and I've been watching bits of movies on YouTube that she had that she starred in, and so on and so forth, because it's very relevant, but we will be here forever. So no. The other event of the same Wednesday when we got the tarp, when we visited this town, okay, everything was kind of fine. We went to another shop, hoping to find a tarp there that would have been okay. And it would have shortened our trip significantly for the day, but also made it less interesting. The shop was closed. We had lunch on the parking lot, eating what we had with us, which tends to happen, what we tend to do when we are driving around, just have bread and salami or prosciutto or something, because there's plenty good stuff that you can just get in a shop and a supermarket, and you can have lunch anywhere, you know. Okay, so on to the next slightly larger town, which is at about, what will it, 3/4 of an hour drive from this town. So village, okay, through the mountains to the village, through the hillsides to the town where the shop was closed, lunch, and then on to another town at about 3/4 of an hour, maybe an hour's drive, okay? In the rain, all of them. And the rain wasn't pelting down, it was just raining on and off. But it does rain down there, thank goodness. So I actually got out of the car a few times to harvest some herbs, which I always do when I'm in that part of the world. I got me some, is that fennel? Dill, I think. You know, one of those huge stalks that grow like yay high. And it's beautiful dill. It's such a fragrant stuff. And you can stick it into teas and into, I've used it over the past week to good effect. So, love me some dill. I also made a huge batch of sleepy mix tea that contains a type of mint that grows there, which is called pennyroyal for you guys who are into herbs. Pennyroyal is also excellent. So the pennyroyal and the dill and rosemary, those three grow all over, if you know where to look. They're really all over the place. And I harvested all three. Also harvested some thyme, and I think that's it more or less, in wild areas around that countryside in the south of France. Yay for us. I mean, excellent, right? So there was that. Then we got to the other town, okay? We got ourselves, after a bit of back and forthing between shops, we've got ourselves our nice big beautiful tarp and a ball of yarn to use to fix it down with. Relief, you know? Okay, so high time for a cup of tea or a cup of coffee. We went into town. It was still raining on and off. It wasn't unpleasant. It was nice temperature. I don't know, 22 degrees or so. It's quite warmer when it rains than it is in here in the Netherlands. And I knew that there is a, I don't know, 16th century, I think, church in the middle of town that has a Black Virgin statue. I don't know if you're familiar with Black Mother, Black Virgin statues. Statues in the south of France and in Spain. They're fairly common. These are medieval statues. Often they're not particularly pretty, but they attract a whole lot of devotion from the country round since the Middle Ages. And in the south of France, there's a couple of places where you can go and see them. One I was planning to visit sits in a museum. Actually, we didn't get to go that far because we had other plans for the holiday, and you had to just pick a hill, you know, either you go this way or you go that way. And we picked the Alps for the rest of our holiday plan, instead of going to the museum where this statue was, which I will certainly go to see at some point or other, but it's different in the museum. This one, in this town, on this famous Wednesday with the rain and the herbs and all the rest of it, it's kind of funny because it's the church building makes me giggle even. Yes, you're having this sort of a slightly uneven French South France town square, which is kind of a town rectangle in the middle of town with tall building fronts on all sides, little streets going off to the sides like that. And where normally you'd expect the church to sort of stand apart from everything else, in this case, the church actually sits in with the fronts of the rest of that side of the square. There's actually a coffee house like right next to it. And then if you go inside, the part that made me giggle is you go inside the church, you go down a couple of steps, like 6 big steps or so, to the level of the floor of the church. And if you face inward like this, there's 3 parts. The middle part and 2 of those, I'm not familiar with the English terms, for the apses, I think, something like that, side parts of the typical classical Catholic church approach, you know. The Black Virgin statue is in the left apse, you know, alcove. The columns that hold up the roof of this whole thing are so big that as you enter through the main entrance into this, which is the only entrance at that point that you really see, go down the steps, etc., you do not see her. You do not instantly see what the action is about. The columns are right like sitting like this, and you can see people behind them, you know, walking back and forth. And there's a painting, and there's a couple of other things, and a couple of statues and stuff sitting on that left side. So theoretically, the north, I hope, side, I haven't checked, of the actual building. On the south side is completely dark. The other apse of the church, okay, is completely dark. It's open, and there's also a couple of paintings and things. Nothing really special, I think. The middle part, where you'd think the action would be, is completely or as totally empty. There is an altar, and maybe there's a Bible on the altar, and that's it. There's zipper-do. I don't think there were any chairs. There are services there. It's an active part of the church community, the religious community in that area. But there isn't any activity at that point. So you have to it's like you're looking at this place, like it's pretty, it's old, it's venerable, it's got these huge, massive columns, you know, like going down like that or going up. And it's a bit grey on the inside, grey stone, and not a lot of decoration, and fairly simple. It feels good. It feels welcoming. It feels old and a bit tired, you know, just like a lot of churches. So as you walk around through the area in the middle there, you come suddenly into this left side of the church where this Black Virgin statue is. And I don't know how to insert images in my videos. I never figured out how to do that. It's supposed to be really easy. So maybe I will figure it out at some point eventually. But it's really a very plain, black, dark, wooden statue of a sitting woman with a child in her lap. Fairly crude even. And she's sitting in a kind of a glass cabinet. There's an altar in front of her. There's candles everywhere because people come around from all over to light candles in this shrine, really. And the sense that I got was of total inner peace. And it's awesome. I love that kind of place. If I lived there, I would go there every week, you know, to just drink in this tense sense of, okay, never mind, go ahead. Total surrender, total contact with the earth. You know, you're in your body, the earth is there for you, you are there for the earth. Peace and collaboration even with earth forces, things like that. Except it doesn't compute in here, it computes in here and in my belly. And it makes it just, you know. But I didn't really have time to pay attention to any of this that much, except I registered this type of a vibration, which I know, and I'm fairly familiar with the type of how that feels for me, because I've, you know, seen it before and read about these places, and I'm very fond of these types of places. It's like part of my life, really. But my husband fell apart. He completely, you know, dissolved in tears, and I still to this day don't really understand why this is such. I don't understand men in general that much, except for saying they're not robots. So far, okay, that I can make sense of. But other than that, this is a very positive vibration. It feels like coming home. I think he said that also. But it just wipes him out completely. He goes, you know, and he gets really emotional, and afterwards he has a really tough time dealing with those emotions. And as he's involved in that, I feel very alone because I'm not really part of that process, obviously, because we never are. I think every one of us has to, we have to do our own story and figure it all out for ourselves. And then at a point, you can make art or you can make poetry, which is what he did. He wrestled for a week or so with a poem that he had been writing to put into words what it was that he was going through. Okay, we had a cup of coffee. It was still raining. We got back to the car. I did more driving than I actually need to be doing myself, but I'm fine doing a lot of driving in the mountains. I like that anyway. He was less comfortable in the car also. And that has impacted him quite a bit. And whatever impacts him impacts me. And because I don't know how it works for him, I get upset and worried. I think that is more or less the bottom line of my whole tale here. During the week afterwards, there were a couple of times where I felt like you're not really here, we're not really communicating, which also happens always during holidays or periods where you're more or less stuck together for a couple of weeks, whereas normally he's off to the office and I'm over here talking to you guys, or doing my witchy things, or whatever it is that I'm doing, or hoovering, or bless me, And what with the Tumo process for me, I think that, as I said last Monday, I came out to tell you about how you do Tumo. If you do Tumo, then your whole vibration changes and you become this different type of version of yourself, really, which isn't all that visible. I would tend to say that it makes me more confident and makes me feel stronger and more courageous, which I've already said a couple of times. It's not like it's that big of a deal, but there is a change. And the thing is that in terms of, it was the top layer of the set, okay? So it starts off with a base that's already problematic, what with lockdown and things and vaccines. We were vaccinated, both of us, and twice, and that wasn't really pleasant, after there was an aftermath to the vaccine in both cases, in both vaccines. So, all that, and it has felt like an uphill battle all year long. On top of that, you get this sort of a wide open emotional situation where you do not know exactly what the other person is feeling, that you're being very intimate with. And I'm having an image now all of a sudden of, in our cases, in my relationship with my husband, it is like I would benefit from having the idea that I am walking around with an animal on a leash, say a dog, for example, a big dog. The dog has moods, okay? In this case, the dog is my husband. It's the same for him. I'm not saying my husband's dog. Just to be clear, I'm just having an image here, hopefully, of the difference in, actually, you cannot really expect the woman to understand the dog completely. She will never think as the dog thinks. The priorities aren't the same. I'm just having this image of a person walking around with an animal on a leash. You're tied together, you're tied to each other, you care for each other, but you don't really know what to expect. Welcome to relationship land. It's bloody awful. And it's fine when most of the time, certainly with a relationship that's lasted this long, What you get is habit, routine, fixed bits and pieces, predictability. You know, it's easy most of the time, normally. And in this case, it really wasn't easy. And it got sort of stuck in my belly, and my whole thing got stuck, and I just got, you know, in trouble with that. Which looks like it's sorting itself out finally after a couple of, you know, a really nasty week with a lot of pain and belly pains and things like that. So it's, I think we'll be improving from here on out. The other thing is that as I continue on thinking about all these things, this was the more or less obvious part of the situation. There is a part where it is me holding the leash, you know, in a way, or connected to this other person. I have to figure out why it is that his emotions make me so insecure. Because that's another really obvious bottom line to this whole story, is that when he gets this way, he has a hard time dealing with it, so therefore I have a hard time dealing with it. If we know, each and every one of us, for ourselves, what it is that it means to be a sovereign, emotional human being, well, you know, then it stays with us, and we do not have to react to things. We do not have to be unpredictable, and so on and so forth, ideally. So I went into like this kind of a rabbit hole with myself about how awfully insecure it makes me feel, and that goes back to my past, to being a toddler, really, being a child, with really unpredictable parents. Yeah, I haven't, talked about that enough. And I realized in one way or another that I define myself in my behavior, in how I experience things even. I am defined constantly in the background by my experiences as a toddler. And when you're 4 and 5 years old and you come into life, okay, I don't believe you necessarily come into life in your awareness as a person when you're 2 years old or when you're a baby, because it's just hopefully you're protected in that stage, and you spend a lot of time sleeping or sitting around. It's not, you're just not active enough to interact yet. And I've had all sorts of turmoil going on in my brain, and I didn't have a chance when I was that age to connect with people really consistently over a longer period of time. And I believe that that is what has led me to my Tumo practice eventually. It's because I don't find it completely obvious to identify with the things that are supposed to provide security and safety. But I had to, so you see, there's always these two sides to this kind of a thing. The more intense the practice, the more powerful the practice, the deeper the changes, the deeper the learning, all, awesome things, all super things. But they are counterbalanced in the dark side by the need that went unanswered, and that's painful. And I have to acknowledge everything for myself. It helps to just acknowledge, to find the words for the needs. I had a moment yesterday where I've been working with tarot cards, quite a bit over the past week. Not like all the time, but it was interesting and worth noting, I have a card out there, which I will just grab in right here, if I can get at it. I had a thought because I felt I had this confusion. I was feeling disconnected from my surroundings right here in my home, where I'm supposed to be living, where I have lived for the past, what is it, 9 years now, I think, nearly. And I had images of France passing through my brain the whole time, places that I actually lived, that I used to be really fond of, that I'm still fond of, but it's like once removed. It's like a meter further off from me. I emotionally don't seem to have the juice to enjoy even the memories as I feel I should, or as I feel I want, as I used to. Normally, it's enough to just remember one bit, or, it's always good. Memories are great. And it was like this urge inside to find out, and sort of a desperation, or I'm looking for a word here, like a frustration, more a frustration than a desperation, really, to where do I belong? How can I belong anywhere? What's about this belonging business? Let me pull a card. So I got a card from this deck, which is the Tarot Gerger. It's a Besançon Tarot. The card that came out is this one, the Two of Cups. And so I wanted a card that showed me why I am confused. It's because I attach everywhere. And I always have. So there's way too much intel in here. I never really had a choice. I never had just like so many people, we never really had a choice. So I'm always looking for the other cup. And that is, yeah. So I advise to self at this point, get a grip after all the turmoil and the difficult phases. Have a coffee, have a cup of hot water and aspirin. Get back in control. And come out and make a video, if possible, which I think I did. I think I made sense. I hope I made sense, I don't really want to make endless long, 50 minutes long videos a lot of the time anymore, but we will just have to see what comes out. We just have to see what happens. And yeah, so I've been having other thoughts about my channel, about my whole Tumo, how much to share of the Tumo process. Certainly I want to share my own experiences in the Tumo process and the Tumo practice, but because I think that's really unique and special, and just wonderful to be sharing. I will be doing that. As to Tumo lessons, so far I haven't felt inspired to do any more lessons. I've done a couple in my Tumo Techniques playlist. You can find a couple of little bits of lessons, instruction, how you can get started with that. But what I'd like to do most of all at this point is to see, first of all, get through this winter for myself and see whether I can determine, okay, so this is more or less what Tumo delivers. And then once I am sure of that, I can start sharing again. I can start it. I have time. I don't know about you, but I have time, I think. So yeah. And then, one thing at a time. I will be sharing my experiences. I'll be sharing all sorts of other things, also all sorts of card things. If I have any, I will always continue to share those. But I don't feel, at the moment, I don't feel confident, because Tumo has been huge. It has been huge. And the impact is such that I am really hesitant to share too much. I don't want people to get the wrong ideas. I don't want people to get stuck in this type of stuff before I've had a chance to figure out how to unstick yourself. Okay? So that's me being accountable. Hopefully. I'm hoping I'm accountable. So thank you so much for being here and for watching and for listening to me talk. And I'll be back next week, maybe from my own phone. Who knows, And I love you and bless you. Okay? See you next time. Bye bye.